Hello, it's GotAUkulele review day. This is the summary video review. For the full review linked below, read that, you'll get a lot more detail. Do consider the Patreon. I don't get paid by brands to write this blog, and that would make these reviews pointless if I did. This Patreon does help keep this site going, and subscribe to the channel. We're down to the small end of the scale today with an instrument from a brand I've featured before. It's a brand you've probably heard of, a German brand who make value Far Eastern instruments called Ortega, and this is a new brand line of theirs called Keiki, and this is the Ortega Keiki Sopranino K1. Little Sopranino ukulele. Sopranino, Sopranissimo, Piccolo, Pocket, call it what you like. We're talking about something that is smaller than a soprano. Here's a regular soprano scale, as you can see, quite a bit smaller. If I line those bridges up, these two tend to be about 13 inches scale length, which is how you measure the scale of a ukulele. This is about 11 from the bridge to the nut, and it's called a Keiki. And it's a diminutive little thing. There's a huge demand for pocket Sopranino ukuleles out there. They sell really well. People want them. And I've reviewed lots from the higher end luthier built stuff. Still not expensive, but you know, made by builders, down through to the Ohanas and the Ayuks made by the big brands. What I find with Sopraninos is they take a certain level of care to get right, and a lot of mistakes get made by the big brands. So I'm not surprised that Ortega have jumped on this bandwagon to make a pocket ukulele, but we'll see how they get on. So this is made of an all laminate body. Some dealers just call it Akume wood and try to hide the fact it's laminate. To be fair to Ortega, they say on their website it's made of laminate. A couple of pieces on the top, couple of pieces on the sides, couple of pieces on the back. And it's really diminutive front to back, and it's little, obviously, because it's a Sopranino. This one is in a brown stain. It's a stain and a very light satin. Comes in a range of rainbow colours. I'm not a big fan of rainbow coloured ukuleles. I think it devalues them, but I understand why people like them. And not much more to say about it, really. It's really simple. Decoration is limited to this turtle etching. I don't like etchings myself. Again, I understand that some people do. This is quite deep though. Now, whilst I would give it a plus mark for the top on this being really thin, I'm concerned about how deep that etching is in terms of strength on that sound hole top. There we are, it's not for me. The bridge, made of walnut, it's a standard tie bar style. I don't like that. This is a small vibrating top. Far better to put a slot bridge on here that uses less wood, and sorry about the siren going past there, that uses less wood on the vibrating top. This is a clear case of Ortega just going in the parts bin and putting on a bridge that they'd apply to one of their sopranos. A bridge is not a bridge. Is a bridge, is a bridge, is a bridge. You know, you should shrink it down for a Sopranino, and that's one of the first failings that I see some brands make, and the good makers avoid. That's a plastic saddle, by the way. Looking inside, really simple, pretty messy though. A lot of glue around the notched linings. The neck block looks like it's been broken off a branch. It's really scruffy. No back bracing, some top bracing. Not much more to say about the body, really. There we are. Up to the neck, typically Chinese rounded profile, stained in brown as well. There's a joint here. There might be one at the headstock. It's topped with a walnut fingerboard with a bit of edge shaping. Second mistake they make is that they've made it really narrow at the nut. Just because you've shrunk down the instrument, a good maker will know that you shouldn't shrink down the nut, because that's about playability if you've got anything other than child's fingers. And that's what they've done. This is about 30 mil at the nut and down to about 24, 25 from G to A. That's really narrow, really uncomfortable. Standard 12 nickel silver frets to the body. They're kind of a bit sharp as well. Not the worst I've seen, but there's some sharpness there, which I don't like. It's not edge bound, but they are stained to try and hide the edges. You get dot markers at 5, 7, 10 and 12. And they're also on the side. Up beyond the nut. Next mistake. I don't mind the shape of that headstock. It's different, reminds me of the Vox guitars, but it's far too big for a small instrument. Ohana made this mistake. They made a really big headstock on their own Ninos that were basically soprano headstocks, and they look just wrong. And that's added to by really big geared tuners. Yeah, you know, I'd prefer to see friction pegs, certainly on a Sopranino. I get this is probably aimed at beginners and they're trying to help them out with something that's easier to use, but these just stick out like massive ears. They're also pretty poor quality and got some horrible pressing marks in the metal, one of which actually would scuff your finger if it has done again. Pretty untidy, really, that. Strings, what the spring tag says are Ortega strings made for them by Aquila. Whether that means it's a whole new Aquila line or just regular Aquilas, I don't know. I suspect it's the latter, but there we are, they're Aquila strings. And it comes in with a street price of about 65 quid, which is one of the cheapest Sopraninos I've seen. So that is going to make people open their eyes and say, oh, that's interesting, nice and cheap. Remember, cheap doesn't mean value for money. The Ohana's going to cost you about 100, a John Daniel's going to cost you about 120, a Dave Morgan's going to cost you about 150. Just because this is 60 quid doesn't mean this is the one to go for necessarily. So we will see. So all in all, the build ain't too bad. It's not a terrible instrument. It feels solid enough. I don't like the etching. I don't like the big bridge. The nut width would rule it out for me because I couldn't play this particularly well. That horrible big headstock looks ridiculous. It is pretty light. It's balanced at the 12th, but it's got that weird thing I see with some instruments is it's not balanced this way. So you hold it and it kind of, the top edge falls back towards you. It's really off-putting, and I don't know why. But other than that, it's not a howler. The volume, okay, not bad. All Sopraninos tend to lose a bit of volume and sustain. But you know what I'm going to say. The volume is all right. I mean, they talk about tuning this, to fair play to Ortega, not in an octave above. I'm just going to check the tuning. But rather in D tuning. So I've got this in A, D, F sharp. There's the D. Sorry, the tuning is going out because it's a new instrument. The sustain is poor, like a lot of Sopraninos are, but not all. The volume is reasonable, not brilliant, but that tone is thin, brittle, and it need not be like this. There are other Sopraninos out there that have got a really nice rich tone. Check out Dave Morgan, even check out the Ohanas. They're not brilliant, but they're better than this. This sounds like elastic bands on a tissue box. And you know what? I find it next to impossible to play because it's just too narrow at the nut. No, I really don't like this. It's thin sounding and it's really nasty to play. And staccato to the point of ridiculous. That's still sounding out of tune. There's a bit of an intonation problem going on with it as well, but that's probably fixed with a bit of setup because this is a strobe tuner and is telling me that it is pretty much bang on in tune. For the people who are going to write comments and say, well, you didn't tune it. It's in tune. See, it's going off. Now that might be because it's so narrow and I'm having to bend strings to fit my fingers in. And, that's just wrong. It's just... Oh dear. Will these sell? Yeah, they will. Of course they'll sell because they're cheap. And shops are selling them, big shops. And influencers on YouTube are saying wonderful things about them. You've got to wonder why, though. I bought this. I'm not being told what to say about it. I'm telling you what I think about it personally. I don't think it's a howler of an instrument. It's not horribly made. But cheap doesn't mean good value for money here. I don't think it is good value for money. If you want a working Sopranino, I think you need to spend more. This is not your example. It's next to unplayable for me because of the nut width. It sounds thin and brittle, and the proportions in various areas are just wrong. So it's not really about the colour or the turtle for me, which I don't like. I could live with those if it played alright, sounded alright, but it doesn't. The Ortega Keiki K1 Sopranino doesn't get an absolutely terrible score on GotAUkulele, but it doesn't get a recommendation at all, I'm afraid. Look elsewhere if you want a pocket. Ohana is probably the one to look at, not this. Or even better, speak to somebody who can make you a proper one, who understands that if you're going to make a sub-soprano instrument, you have to take certain things into account to make them work and sound okay. It can be done. I'm afraid Keiki didn't. Back next week. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and go carefully. Bye-bye.